Hello, and welcome to Somerset Highlander. This is the second year we have been following the development of the wildlife-friendly garden. Winter hung around for quite some time, and spring didn't appear until early April.
So it's Saturday 15th of April 2023. It's been a very slow spring actually, to be fair. It's been very wet, not that warm, but now we can safely say that spring's definitely here. We've had the daffodils come and go, but you can start to see recovery. It looks bare here in the cottage garden at the moment, but we're starting to get the first shoots of recovery. The roses are doing well. The hedge is starting to get a bit more mature, and if we come across to what we love to call the copse area, you can see we're starting to get some flowers out. I'm going to do a bit of weeding here as well. It's the first proper full day we'll be doing in the garden with new plants. The Amelanchier is starting to flower, which is lovely, and then we're starting to get the end part of the cherry tree, unfortunately, but it was a lovely bloom, and then after that we'll start to get some growing tree flowers as well. So the periwinkle around by the fountain in the courtyard's doing really well. As you can see, they're draping down nicely. We'll cut away some of the older dead leaves, but the flowers are doing really nicely. Grass we keep trimming because it's just atrophied and keeps growing, but as you can see, we're starting to get the early shoots of recovery here too, and we've also got a lot of the ferns and longer bigger plants starting to establish themselves more now. So I haven't pressure washed yet, but once I do it'll look a lot neater. But first things first, get the plants in, give them time to establish. Again, the periwinkle is doing great here, but the ferns have really started to grow as well, and you start to see the cover on the ground as well. This plant here is a Dicentra. Gives lovely little sort of heart-shaped flowers. Hacked it right back to the ground. We weren't sure it was going to recover, but it's really come on in the last couple of weeks. So this is the wildflower turf. So as you can see, we've got a few flowers coming up. Interestingly enough, I think this might be seeded from elsewhere in the garden, but it's doing really well. We didn't have any red clover earlier in the year, but there is some in there, so it's going to start to come through. But you've from seeing the video from last year in August, I cut it right back, and it's just started to explode with growth now. And the nice thing is it also starts to soften the area that we live around, so it doesn't look quite as hard-edged. Tulips have done really well again this year, and we planted obviously new bulbs this year and they've come out beautifully. We had a clutch of daffodils in there previously, and we'll put some other plants in, some cosmos probably later in the year. As we then swing back round, you see again the wildflower meadow, and this, I'll be honest, I can't remember what it's called. It's just nice, a splash of colour, but we're starting to see a few wallflowers and other plants starting to peek through now. So spring's definitely well and truly arrived. Against the back wall, we've got our nice daffodils here, which we planted. The teasel's really starting to come in, so we should get a flower this year. It doesn't flower in the first year. I have to say it seems to be really liking the soil. But the reason we planted it is partly to give structure in winter, but also a nice seed source for birds. And then you can see the carpet of oxidized daisies really starting to take off. We've got our hollyhocks poking through. That's all self-seeded. And then our Banksia started to really come on. You can see lots of buds there. So hopefully we'll get some good flowering this year. And it's starting to grow really quite nicely. So our wallflowers are doing really well, as is the rosemary. This is our sort of sensory area, just really nice to rub and smell the rosemary. It's beautiful. but the wallflowers behind are doing great. But everything else is recovering really nicely. Hopefully this year the lavender will also do better. It wasn't great last year, but apparently that was true of a lot of places around the UK. Lavender did struggle. This Hebe is enormous, and we'll probably have to trim that back. But behind it we do have the witch hazel, and it started to flower as well, which is great. And we weren't actually sure that we were going to get anything last year, because it was really struggling in the drought, but it seems to recover beautifully. The hawthorn is really coming on nicely, and one of the projects we're going to do today, just behind here, we've got quite a lot of open space, but you can see it's in the shade. So we have some foxgloves that we're going to plant there with the hope that they'll start to seed and take root, and then eventually we'll take some of the seeds from here and transfer them to the front in the near future. The ivy's starting to take over the wall as well, and then obviously we have a lot of new growth here, suddenly just a proliferation. And then we have a hosta that's just starting to poke through from last year. We weren't sure if it survived, but it has. So finally we have the pond. These are the irises, the fennel, etc., and the grasses that we planted last year. They did quite well. The irises obviously wouldn't, but they seem to have really settled in, and we're starting to see a lot of growth. What we're also seeing is the marsh marigold. It's in full flower. It flowers quite early in the year, but it's looking lovely. And then across here, you can see it as well. So one of the bigger issues I've got is I've got quite a lot of space open here, and I want to give a bit more cover to anything that wants to come in. So I've managed to acquire some more lilies, some for different depths. Some are quite shallow, some are deeper, and we're going to plant them today.